The most basic editing techniques that you'll need to know during the post-production process for your podcast are trim, edit, and fade. So let's talk about how to do those. Again, I'm using Adobe Audition right here, but these basic techniques can be applied to whatever application you're using to edit your show. So I've recorded a very real and not fake podcast episode. Hello and welcome to my super real podcast all about things. This is definitely a real episode, and that's what we're going to be working with today, just as an example. So in this case, it's one track. It's just me talking. You can notice as I was recording, I was monitoring the levels on the Rodecaster Pro. It's not something I'm recording to use as an example while editing this. But as I play this episode back, you can see that the audio levels are bouncing right around here where they're kind of averaging around -25. So it might be a little low. Using Adobe Audition, I can increase that gain a little bit and make it kind of go right around -15. And here's a quick rule of thumb too, if you're using something that doesn't have the exact numbers on your meters, this might not be the most professional way to do things, but I've often found that if I turn my computer volume at about halfway or a little below it, and I make things sound good at that level, that they tend to even out. So if you're in a pinch, that's something you can do to get the right levels. But beyond that, let's cut to cutting, fading, and trimming. Sounds like we're talking about haircuts, but we're not. Once you get a lot of experience editing your show, you're going to be able to read your audio waveforms the same way you would read a video waveform. Looking at this one right here, I can see that I'm talking, and the dead space obviously means that I have stopped talking, and there's a few bumps over here, which probably mean that I just sort of muttered to myself or made a note that's probably not part of the show. So we need to get rid of this end part of the show here. There's a couple ways to do that. I can play the end to see where I want it to stop. Ride in the wilderness. There we go. And now I can either just drag this track since it's at the end, and now I've cut off right there. Wilderness. Or I could use cut. Pretty much any application has some sort of razor blade tool, and you can cut right there, and then you can just delete. I was switching between tools. In the case of Adobe Audition, I pressed R to bring up the razor blade and V to go back to the pointer. Now that was easy because we were working with the end of the clip, so it was pretty simple to get rid of it. But if we wanted to cut something out of the middle, that's where it's going to get a little more complicated. So let's cut out this part here where I give my little disclaimer. This is definitely a real episode. It's not something I'm recording to use as an example while editing this course. Maybe we don't need that disclaimer, so I'm going to use the razor blade tool and put a cut at the beginning. This is definitely and a cut at the end, and then what I can do is just select it and delete it, and it is gone. And then I can just bring my audio tracks together, and it should play smoothly. Just all about things, and of course, you kind of heard. I don't know if you could hear that. There was sort of a little like a glitch in the middle here. Just all about things, and so what I can do is even trim this up a little more, push them together. In Adobe Audition specifically, as you overlap clips, it will automatically fade them. All about things. And of course, it's going to be, there we go. If you don't want to do that, you can always just use a different track and you can start to overlap your audio that way. All about things. And so I can extend this maybe a little bit and make it seem more natural. All about things. And of course, there we go. Going to be either way is totally fine. Like we talked about earlier, if it works, and you don't need to stress yourself out too much beyond that. I'm going to go back and just keep this all on one track though, for the sake of simplicity. About things. And I do want to talk quickly about ripple deleting. So I deleted this and everything just kind of stayed where it was and I had to move it over. Most applications have a function called ripple delete, which in the case of Adobe Audition, instead of pressing delete, if I pressed shift delete, it deleted the part that I selected, but it also automatically moved the next part over. About things. And then I can still adjust it or fine tune it if I need to. And this can be helpful if you're going through a long audio file and you need to cut parts out and have everything kind of snap over. If you've ever edited video in Final Cut Pro, a ripple delete basically is how the Final Cut Pro timeline works, or when you cut stuff out, everything snaps together. So now that we've cut and trimmed some of our clips, fading is going to also be important as well. Here at the end, you can hear, if you listen closely, you can hear the audio just cut out. The wilderness. It just goes and just stops right there. So in Audition, I can click this little gray box and just drag over a fade line. Ride in the wilderness. And now it fades out and it sounds a little bit better. Basically, every editing application has a way to fade. Most of them are very simple like this, but again, depending on what you're using, you might need to do a quick search to find out exactly how to fade in your application. And chances are, even with a very simple production, you're probably going to want to add in at least a little music, probably at the beginning or the end of your show. So I'm going to take the bumper music that we've been using throughout this entire course, and I'm going to bring that in here. But what doesn't often sound the best is if you just have it play at the end. Wilderness. I mean, it's not bad. It gets the job done, but what could sound a little better is if I do have it overlap a little more and maybe fade in a little more slowly. In the wilderness. There we go. So my talking audio faded out, the music faded in, and it worked really, really well. The same thing would apply at the beginning. So what I could do is actually select all of my clips and just drag them over, bring in my song here, listen to where I want it to start fading into my voice. So with this song specifically, and this is where personal taste comes into it, but with this song specifically, it kind of has that last note where it goes like dun, but you can kind of hear the notes ringing out and a little bit of an echo. That's where I would like the show to start. So I'm going to drag this over. Hello and welcome. Maybe it can be paced a little better. Hello and I'm going to fade this in just in case there's a little bit of audio there at the beginning. Hello and welcome to There we go. And I think that's a nice transition because we're still hearing some of that song at the beginning and then my voice starts. And this is basically what this sample episode would look like. The purple tracks are the music at the beginning and the end, and the blue is just my voice. Of course, this is only 36 seconds long. Chances are your show's going to be significantly longer than 36 seconds. There really isn't an ideal length for a podcast. It depends on you, your topic, and your audience. So keep that in mind. I know that for me personally, I love shows that are at least an hour long because I like to listen to them for extended periods. So I try to keep all my podcasts at about the hour mark, but there's really no right or wrong way. Some people do 10-minute podcasts and do extremely well. So you just got to do what works for you and your audience. So now I've got this episode all finished and ready to go.